In my last video, I selected what I think are the 10 best Halo levels ever made, with Halo 3's The Covenant deservedly coming out on top. But there were also quite a few others on my shortlist that didn't quite make the cut, so I thought I'd put together a follow-up of sorts, talking through the best of the rest of Halo's missions in no particular order. And if you'd like to check out my ranking of Halo's 10 best levels first, just hit the card appearing on screen right now. Halo 3 ODST's Coastal Highway could definitely have been in my top 10, but with NMPD HQ already included, it felt unfair to feature two shorter missions when I had so few spots available. It's really all about the vehicle section, which occurs midway through its runtime as you try to escape the doomed city of New Mombasa with an engineer in tow. An absolute masterclass in how to create something incredible using limited resources, the highway keeps the space the action takes place in relatively enclosed, and because you're only ever travelling in essentially a straight line, Bungie were able to fully focus their efforts on the spectacle in the skies above. The dialogue during this sequence is fantastic too, and I really love how Buck's demeanour changes from somewhat jovial to very concerned as he witnesses more and more of the city's destruction. While the final encounter of the mission, and ODST as a whole, which follows, is decent enough, it doesn't set the world on fire as much as you might expect, which is a shame considering just how good the sequence before it is. Another level which struggles similarly to Coastal Highway is Halo Combat Evolved's Assault on the Control Room. The Scorpion Run, which makes up the majority of its middle, is marvellous, and it's a part of the game I found particularly impressive when I first played it some 21 years ago. Trundling through the tundra, blasting everything in sight into little pieces, is still just as fun today as it was back then, and it's a section which shines especially brightly when playing co-op due to the scale of events and the chaos unfolding around you. Unfortunately, there are some very repetitive indoor sections on either side of it which really drag the experience down and increase its runtime far beyond what was necessary as you explore the same circular rooms and bridges over and over again. With some editing, it could have conceivably made a push to be counted as one of my top 5 Halo levels, but as it stands, it's just a bit too flabby for my liking. Poor old Halo 5 did not feature in my previous video at all, and there was only ever one mission that had a chance, Swords of Sanghelios. That being said, it being picked was always very, very unlikely, but I do want to acknowledge it nonetheless, as it is good fun. You come face to face with a lot of different alien races during the Halo series, yet you're never given too great a glimpse into any of their backgrounds, which makes visiting the Elite's homeworld and learning more about their history a real treat. Add to that some well-designed encounters in areas which take advantage of Halo 5's expanded moveset, and the reintroduction of the Arbiter after his absence in Halo 4, and you have a level which stands out as one of the best in a very up and down campaign. Halo Infinite is, I think, the best Halo title 343 Industries has created so far, and there were a couple of missions that I did go back and take a closer look at when putting pen to paper for my top 10. One of them was Warship Gbraakon, the game's first level. It's a really classy start to the game which sets the scene well and has a good mix of small-scale encounters, larger firefights and set pieces, as well as some subtle tutorialization which has shades of Combat Evolved's The Pillar of Autumn about it. This hallway where you get your hands on tons of grenades and are then given the space to try them out being just one of a few examples. I'm also a big fan of the escape sequence, which rounds things out by putting your grappling skills to the test as you leap between collapsing rooms, and the track which accompanies it, Gbraakon Escape, is a genuinely excellent piece of music too. In the end, while well done, it didn't quite do enough to stand head and shoulders above the others I eventually settled on, which is why it's in this video instead. Not so long ago, I used to detest Gravemind in Halo 2. I always understood to some degree why others seemed to really enjoy it, but it never really clicked for me in the same way, no matter how much I played it. In recent years, however, my opinion of it has softened hugely, to the point where it was one of the missions which came particularly close to making my greatest of all time list. What lost it a few marks is its lack of vehicular combat, which is generally included in my favourites, and that it can be a real slog to get through, although at the same time, the chaotic encounters you find yourself involved in, caused by the Covenant Civil War, are very engaging in both gameplay and narrative terms. Unfolding towards Halo 2's conclusion, it feels like an appropriate crescendo to events prior that has huge implications in terms of the trilogy's story. And of course, who can forget about this encounter near its end featuring Breaking Benjamin's Blow Me Away. It's a little cheesy for sure, but it's cheesy in the best way possible. The Storm in Halo 3 is another level I've been thinking about since my last upload, to the point I've been wondering whether I gave it too short a shrift. Halo 3 wasn't a game that necessarily jumped out at me during its first few hours, as a lot of what was on offer didn't feel like that big a technical leap over previous entries in the series. In retrospect, I was completely incorrect. The scale and dynamism of combat was vastly improved, and I did eventually change my mind once I arrived at the Storm's famous set piece. Fighting a scarab on a mongoose while an entire squad of marines did similar was so far ahead of anything seen in Combat Evolved or 2 that I could barely believe what I was playing. It also contains some solid on-foot sections, such as the battle up a hill at its close I really like, and the end cutscene ushering in the arrival of the Flood is chilling. I've said before that I think Halo 3 is one of the most consistent entries in the series in terms of quality, and the Storm being only its third or fourth best mission is testament to that. There was definitely a world where it made it onto my top 10. Like Swords of Sanghelios earlier, Infinity from Halo 4 was another option I honestly only briefly considered, but I did review a run-through of it, and so it deserves to be mentioned here. Halo 4 is a very segmented game, which lacks a lot of the cohesiveness of earlier titles. They would transition smoothly between on-foot and vehicle sections and larger and smaller environments, whereas 343 Industries made an outing almost feels Call of Duty-like in its execution. There are sections during which you're clearly meant to be travelling on foot, and there are sections you're clearly meant to be using a specific vehicle for, but rarely, if ever, are you given a ton of options and allowed to formulate your own plan. Infinity is very much in that mould, like the rest of 4's campaign, but it's the mission which does it best. The jungle section it opens with does go on for too long, but there's enough variety and changes of scenery that it manages to keep you engaged for most of its runtime. For some Halo titles, those developed by 343 mainly, it was more feast than famine in my ranking, but that certainly wasn't the case for Halo Reach, from which there were 3 entries. Tip of the Spear, New Alexandria and Exodus were all present, and there could very well have been a 4th as well in the form of the Pillar of Autumn. Lone Wolf aside, it is a fitting climax to Bungie's time with the franchise, not just because its name mirrors that of Halo's first ever mission, but because it's full to the brim with memorable moments as well. The Mongoose run past multiple scarabs is amazing, Carter's death is handled well, as is Emil's, and the way it connects to the start of Combat Evolved is brilliant, although it is my understanding that Bungie took some liberties with the established lore in order to make that happen. It also features every type of Covenant enemy possible, an enjoyable Mac cannon sequence and great pacing. There are few criticisms I can level at it. However, because I had a short list of 4 Reach missions and I wasn't even sure I wanted to include 3, something had to give, and that something was the Pillar of Autumn. I like to think of 2 Betrayals as Assault on the Control Room's evil twin, where the latter is an entertaining romp through snowy surroundings at a point in Halo Combat Evolved where you're used to fighting the Covenant. The former is a moody affair which takes place under cover of night and illustrates just how much devastation the Flood have the potential to cause. Regardless of tone, my 2 issues with 2 Betrayals are by and large the same as those I have with Assault on the Control Room. The outdoor sections are terrific, and the multi-faction conflict ensures that even though you're mostly retreading your steps, enough has changed that you're kept engaged. On the other hand, that also means you're forced to go through these same repetitive indoor sections again, and even though the Flood do help add variety, I'm not sure they do enough to take the edge off. In the end, 2 Betrayals and Assault on the Control Room sharing the same layout, a good portion of which isn't the most inspiring, both cost them dearly. Pelican Down is probably my favourite level in Halo Infinite for a couple of reasons. First, in narrative terms, it marks the point in the campaign where for the first time I actually began to enjoy Master Chief, the weapon and the pilot as a trio. I remain on the fence when it comes to both the weapon and the pilot as individuals, but Pelican Down's ending scenes did enough to reassure me that as part of a group, they aren't half bad. Second, it's also the mission where I think the open world of Zeta Halo is used to its fullest as part of Infinite's campaign. After destroying 3 anti-aircraft guns dotted around the edge of a striking waterlogged area full of downed UNSC ships, you then head back to that very same area to take on a boss or bosses in the form of 2 Spartan killers. It's cohesive and designed in such a way that while you are still in the open world and therefore have choices, you're guided around a small part of it to keep things interesting. The go to 3 places and do the same thing 3 times objective style is used, which is a shame, and ultimately it's that which means on balance I wouldn't quite call it one of the best missions Halo has to offer. Halo 2's Metropolis provided some much needed relief when I played through its campaign for the first time. I'd been looking forward to taking on the Covenant on Earth for what seemed like forever, but the mission preceding it, Outskirts, didn't really do it for me, and I was starting to get somewhat concerned. Metropolis by comparison is a much better effort. The bridge sequence it kicks things off with is more like what you'd expect from a large urban battle, and during its latter stages, a decent amount of Halo's sandbox is on offer. Bringing down the Scarab was a defining moment in 2's campaign back in 2004. It was a truly unexpected and unique encounter, but I would say that its impact has softened a tad over the years, with later titles doing an even better job of them. Another problem is the tunnel you're forced to go through towards its opening, which is very similar to the one you spent a lot of time in during Outskirts. All in all, Metropolis is generally very well designed and one of Halo 2's better missions, but it lost out on a place in my ranking due to Reach's Exodus doing an overall better job of representing urban combat. Finally, we come to Halo 3's finale, the level Halo. If my last video had been titled "Which Halo set piece is the best?", then this one definitely would have been in with a shout of taking home the top prize. Combat Evolves the Pillar of Autumn may have done it first, but I'd say Halo's Warthog run comes out the stronger of the pair due to its increased scale and it being more beginner friendly than its predecessor. It was a much better choice than, say, including a boss battle like at the end of Halo 2. I cannot stand the fight against Tartarus, the world's most irritating bullet sponge, and Bungie does a good job of making it a real spectacle as explosions surround you and One Final Effort, one of the series' best tracks, plays in the background. As mentioned, however, I was looking at the quality of each of the missions on my shortlist as a whole, and the rest of Halo isn't really anything to write home about. There's nothing wrong with it, but it does little that separates it from many others in the series, and I needed just a touch more consistency for it to truly be considered one of Halo's greatest levels. Thanks for watching the video and for the recent 30,000 subscriber milestone, boys, girls and Spartans. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, do consider liking and subscribing, and hopefully I'll catch you all again soon.